Hey, good day there. This is Joe Van Cleve. Welcome to another episode of the Typewriter video series. Today is going to be kind of a slightly different episode because I'm going to be doing something on camera that I'm not really sure if I know how to do or if it's going to work. And what this is I'm going to do some servicing to one of my typewriters that I've noticed has a problem. So stick with us and hopefully we'll both learn something. Well, what we have here is we have a 1953 era Hermes Rocket. And this is one of my favorite typewriters. I took this on a long road trip last autumn of 2015, and I had a great time, and it worked really well for me. But when I was doing some stream of consciousness rough draft writing with it a couple days ago, I noticed it had a problem. Now, when you're servicing a machine that has a mechanical problem, oftentimes the problem can be either intermittent or it only shows up under certain circumstances. So before you dig into the machine, you have to know how to accurately reproduce the problem so that once you've serviced it, you can test it and know for certain that you fixed it. Now, this particular machine, this Rocket, the problem it had was, well, if I do solid and firm two-fingered typing, it works fine. But I was doing some touch typing. I was starting to get some skipping, which tells me that it may have a problem with the escapement mechanism. And so I want to be able to, first of all, reproduce the problem, and then I want to be able to go in there and work on the escapement. So first of all, let's see if I can reproduce the problem. Well, let's see if I can reproduce the problem here. This is just a junk piece of paper, and it doesn't show up all the time. Ah, there it goes. See that? Right after the R for some reason. There it goes. So I had this series of skips right here, 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 here. So it appears to happen intermittently when you're typing in a rapid pace with a not real hard finger pressure. Okay, so we're going to need some tools and supplies in order to work on this typewriter. Well, I'm working on a rubber mat on my workbench. So I'm going to need some towels. I have some old rags. I also have a bunch of paper towels, which comes in handy. I'm going to need some cotton Q-tips, and I like to use also these plastic mascara brushes for scrubbing in various things if I need to. I'm going to use some 92%, 91% isopropyl alcohol that I have put into a little squeeze bottle that helps me get it into places more accurately. I'm going to be using, if I need to, some of this PB Blaster as a degreaser. It's pretty smelly, by the way, so make sure you use it in a well-ventilated area. I also like to use this Tri-Flow lubricant, just a spray lubricant. I sometimes will use that after I degrease the mechanism. And also, I can use this electronic cleaner. It's an electronic grade degreaser that's really good for removing old greases. And then finally is naphtha or Zippo lighter fluid is also a good kind of a combination light lubricant and degreaser that helps to get in tight places. So those are my supplies I'm going to start off with. Oh yeah, tools. So I'm going to need a couple different sizes of flathead screwdrivers, slotted screwdrivers, I should say, and maybe pliers or whatever. But let's look into taking this machine apart. Okay, so to take the inner chassis out of the Rocket, you're going to have to take off, there's two screws on the sides of the carriage, on that side and also this side right here. There's going to be a screw in the back, in the middle, and there's going to be two screws on the front of the space bar right there. And I think that's all we need, so let's go do it. Okay, so I've taken all the screws off around the periphery of the body, and I have them on a little magnetic tray here. Okay, so the front part comes off. I'll set that aside. And then the back part comes off like that. And the chassis sits inside of the base. Now keep in mind, when you're removing the chassis, the edges down here are very sharp, that you could get a slice type of cut. But this is how you remove the chassis from the body. Pretty simple. So here we have the typewriter that's been placed up on its back end. So underneath here, this right here is going to be the spring motor that has the drawband that operates the carriage. And in this area right here is the escapement. Now I don't want to take it apart. I'm not skilled at that. I'm not a professional typewriter mechanic technician, but I am going to try degreasing both of these areas. So what I want to look at now is the escapement mechanism. And so as I type a letter, you can maybe see the way this little, you can see the tooth of a gear of sprocket in there. And this little lever, a spring-loaded lever, is permitting it to move. See that skip right there? It just skipped one. But it's supposed to only move one tooth at a time as you're typing. The first thing I'm going to try doing is degreasing this with some PB Blaster and alcohol and stuff. And yeah, that's a lot of PB Blaster, but we want to be thorough with it. Now I'm going to just kind of cycle this thing and let it work. Let it soak in as it's working. So what I've done is I've taken the ribbon out completely, and now with the machine sitting on its back, I'm pointing down into where the top of the escapement mechanism is, and I've hit it with more PB Blaster, and then I hit it with isopropyl alcohol. I want to flush out all the PB Blaster and all the gunk in that escapement mechanism with PB Blaster. Now I'm going to rapidly test the machine over and over again. Various kinds of light taps, rapid taps, the kind of tapping that I was more likely to get skipping. Keeping in mind, when you return the carriage, the spring motor is more tightly wound and it's more likely to skip in the left side of the carriage. Now I've also, after hitting with PB Blaster, I went down into the top of the escapement mechanism with a cotton swab and I cleaned all the grease and gunk out of there, because really what happens is the PB Blaster kind of suspends the grease into its lubricant solution, and it's still, you have to get in there and swab it out. And then I followed it up with some more alcohol. So now that I've thoroughly degreased and cleaned the escapement as much as I can, there's a lot of oil and residue that has drained down from the escapement to the bottom, to the back of the machine here, and I really want to clean up as much as I can all of that oily residue. Of course, most of it's draining out onto my towel here, but on my workbench, but I want to really clean all this residue as much as I can so it doesn't go anywhere else that I don't want it to in the machine. So I'm going to do some cleanup here. So I'm going to test the escapement now. What I have is I have the chassis propped up on blocks, but I have the right side of the typewriter higher than the left, so the carriage will be going downhill as it types. And that's the condition under which it's most likely going to skip, because the carriage can move faster downhill, and also starting at the left side of the carriage, the spring motor is under maximum tension. So, oops, see, there's a little bit of skipping still. So it's always a good idea when you're working with these troublesome mechanical problems to first of all figure out if it's related to dirt and old grease. So what we've gone is we of course gone ahead and we've degreased thoroughly the escapement mechanism. And I'm pretty darn sure there's no additional dirt in there, hard grease or anything. It's all clean, lubed and everything. So I'm still getting an intermittent skipping problem on when I'm typing. And I've been able to figure out how to reproduce it pretty good. So let's take a look at it. So I was able to reproduce the skipping problem pretty accurately by hitting the G and the 6 key, which are next to each other in the middle of the keyboard. Middle of the basket, and also the F and 5 are next to each other. When you're typing these adjacent keys very fast, you know, the timing is real critical, but I was able to get the problem to reproduce itself pretty accurately, pretty reliably that way. And then I started looking more closely at how the escapement mechanism actually works, and let's take a look at that. So what we're looking at is underneath the carriage mechanism, and this gear, the small gear, right? I can't even get my pointer into it, but it's the gear on top of the escapement mechanism right here. It engages a rack gear. And this rack gear, you see me pulling it up and down? Well, the teeth on that rack gear were engaging at the top of that round gear. And it should have been more down toward the bottom, the middle of the round gear like it is now, okay? But it was engaging at the top of the round gear. And I believe the problem was an intermittent problem because the edge of the round gear is worn due to age. It's the edge of this round gear right here. The top edge of those teeth is getting worn due to years of use. And this bar that has teeth on it was engaging only the top edge. So I think that was the root cause of the problem, and I'll show you how I fixed it. Okay, so this bar down here that starts at this and goes to the left, that is that linear rack gear that's engaging the round gear in the escapement mechanism. And its position is controlled by the carriage release lever. The carriage release lever, where my finger is up here, when you pull the lever forward, it pivots this bar out of the way of that gear and allows the carriage to move freely. And the problem, I believe, is that there is a little linkage, a little arm that connects this knob to this rack gear. It was bent. And so basically when this carriage release lever is in the reset position, so the escapement is engaged, this bar wasn't pivoted all the way down to fully engage the escapement gear. And so what I had to do is I had to hold this bar from moving with a pair of pliers, and I had to bend this arm up a little bit. So it looks like I found the root cause to this problem. I'm going to have to put the typewriter back together now. Well, all right then, we have the typewriter all together, and let's do a round of the quick brown fox. She types fine. Well, this was an interesting exercise. So I never thought of myself as actually a professional typewriter repairman. I've only learned a little bit of this as I've owned typewriters. And I hope that I haven't represented myself as a typewriter expert, mechanically speaking. I'm just like you, I'm just learning. But this was an interesting exercise. We started off thinking that it was maybe grease and old hardened lubricants in the escapement mechanism causing our problem, but it turned out to be a bent arm on the carriage release lever, and I could see almost how that might happen due to age. Maybe somebody actually bent it by mistake. Maybe they grabbed the machine by the side of the carriage when it was extended and bent that arm, right? Bent that rack gear a little bit also. But it was obviously riding right along the top edge of the round gear instead of down on the middle of the teeth. And that looks like the root cause we found. It was a mechanical problem. We fixed it, and I'm real happy. I think I've made this typewriter better. Well, I hope this video encourages you to not be afraid to dig into your machines and try to tackle those problems. So until next time, you have a great time typing. This is Joe Van Cleef.